Well, hello. My name is Lynn Desert. I'm an executive career coach, and with me I have Natalie Washington. She is a recruiter that works with executives, managers, all levels of individuals. Today, we are going to be talking about 3 ways that you can make the recruiter's life a little bit easier, get that job that much sooner. We'll talk to you in a minute. Well, welcome back, and I have, as I said, Natalie Washington, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things you can do to get that job that much quicker. So, Natalie, you work with people every day,
Yes.
and I have to think that there are some things that really just happen over and over and over again that you wish you could tell people and say, get with the program,
Yeah,
right?
step up the game.
Step up the game. So what would you say is the number one thing that you find that people are just not doing, and if they just made some of these little changes could really make a difference in their game of finding a job?
One of the things that comes up often would be your contact information. I think we get wrapped up in the fact that you know who you are, but remember you're trying to display to others who you are. So one of the things you want to make sure of is that when you are submitting your resume, that you have your email on your resume so someone can reach out to you. Because today, instead of picking up that phone and making the call, we're typically sending you an email to make that first connection.
Now, I'm finding it really hard to believe that somebody doesn't give their contact information on a resume.
It probably happens 25 to 30% of the time.
Wow, that's
which is a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. When you're going through, hundreds of people a week, it's a lot. So it can be frustrating, especially if you're the candidate that we want to connect with, and our first line of connection would be email, and we're not able to reach you. But additionally, you'll have your phone number on there. That's wonderful. But when we go to call it, because we can't connect with you via email, your mailbox is full if you haven't picked it up, or you haven't set up your mailbox at all because you just got a new phone, or whatever those situations are. So now you've only offered us one way to communicate with you, and then that one way we're trying to communicate with you is ineffective because you didn't think to check to make sure that your mailbox wasn't full, that you've listened to your emails, to your voicemails and deleted them, or set up your voicemail so someone could leave a message.
One of the things, and this just happened to kind of hit me as you were talking about that, and this happens even in my family and just with friends. I'll call somebody's cell phone, and they don't even have a greeting there to tell me who they are. And so it's this, the blanket, this is this phone number.
Right.
And I am sometimes a little, I leave a message, but I'm not quite sure if I got to the right person, or do you encounter that too?
Yes, not quite as often, thank goodness. That used to be more of a big deal, but that is definitely something to think about. You want to make sure that especially during your job search, you can have whatever greeting you want outside of that, but during your job search, you want to make sure that whomever's calling understands who they're leaving a message for, because many times it's confidential, and we don't know who else might have access to that phone that we're uncomfortable giving that information to, and you may be uncomfortable having them know that information. But also brings me to a point, it depends on the level of position, but make sure that the email that you're using is professional. So if you have a fun, carefree email, that's great for your social life. But today creating an email is very it's free.
Easy.
Yeah,
right.
Easy and free. So make sure that you go that extra step if you don't have something that's plain and simple, and you want to create something that's professional. That's professional, and that people aren't uncomfortable sending you that email.
Right. And one of the things that I do find is that when people set up those emails, and they do it purposely, to have a separate email while they're on a job search, because once they get the job, they can shut it down.
Absolutely.
And they've, signed up for all these newsletters and everything else, and they really don't have to worry about them anymore. I mean, then you
That's
have to
correct.
think about transitioning what might be on that email account to your personal one if you want to continue having communications from specific people
Absolutely.
or groups.
Yeah,
Okay, so
absolutely.
great tip. So the second thing that we kind of chatted a little bit about was, and I run across this too, is this whole question about references and when to have them and when do you present them? What's your thoughts about that?
So what I recommend, one thing I do want to make clear is your reference sheet is as important as your resume. So you want to make sure that when you're creating a resume or updating your resume, that you are doing it, you're creating your reference sheet and or updating your reference sheet also. So you want to make sure there's a header with all your contact information, and you want to make sure that you have all of the details that a recruiter will need to follow up with your references immediately once we get to that portion of the hiring process. So what I always recommend is have the person's name that you want us to contact, what the relationship is with you. So that means, is that a supervisor, is it a coworker, or is it a personal relationship? If it is a coworker and or a supervisor, what you're going to want to do is explain to us what company was that relationship in, because that person may no longer be at the same company that you're at now, that you're giving the reference for, or you may have been moved on, etc. So you want to make it clear. And then you also want to make sure you provide a phone number, and equally as important is an email address, because many times we are sending a form to be completed, which eliminates phone tag. That's why we do that. That's why the phone calls are our secondary resource to use. With the email, it allows us to send a form. The person on the other end can complete that at their convenience and get it back to us efficiently. And so the email with your references would be equally as important as a phone number.
Okay, super. So have that reference sheet made available, have it complete, ready to go. And one of the other things that we kind of chatted about before is it's a good idea to contact the people that you put on the reference sheet to make sure that they do want to serve as a reference, and also find out what they're going to say about you before you put them on there, because
that's very
that
true.
Can be tricky, right?
We do, and you don't want to get yourself in an uncomfortable or awkward situation. So always ask your reference, or let them know that you're going to be using them, and come out and ask them, are you willing to provide me a favorable reference? And that opens the door, and then everybody can be comfortable.
Right, super. So let's move on. The fourth thing that we kind of talked a little bit about is, at what point is that responsibility, that personal responsibility of follow-up? And what does that entail from your perspective that makes your life easier in working with you?
Yes. One of the easiest ways to follow up and show your interest is a quick thank you note. And it's made very, very easy with email. You don't have to do the U.S. mail any longer. It's very appropriate and expected in today's professional environment. So that's a quick way to let them know that you appreciate their time and that you do still have a continued interest. Thereafter, you can wait a couple of days, or make sure at the end of the interview that you ask what the expectation is for follow-up. Whether they're going to call you or you should call them, and manage those expectations right up front. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a couple days, but if you ask, you'll usually get a succinct response from your interviewer as to what you can expect going forward.
And I had a client that I was working with, and she had gone on a great job interview, and it was the first job interview. The second one came very quickly, and then they said to her, well, we're not going to make a decision for 6 to 8 weeks.
That's right.
And So my recommendation to her was you don't wait 6 to 8 weeks. You do want to make some contact during that period of time, and just to let them know that you are interested, because I think that makes a difference.
It absolutely does.
Okay.
And, so if it's 6 weeks, I would say twice, just, letting them know that you still have an interest and that you hope that you're still part of the process. Because remember, for you, you are dealing with maybe one or two people, but for them, they may be dealing with many more than that. So it's nice for us to have that gentle reminder, yes, this person is within the process, and make that mental note for us to do our due diligence and follow up also. So very good recommendation.
Great. Now, let's talk about the flip side where somebody over communicates. What's that look like? And what really, how do you control that, or how do you kind of pull that in, rein it in?
Right. Some of the same way. So you want to make sure, and sometimes this comes up when they're trying to get that first initial interview, and that can be the more difficult. It's not as hard when you're in the process, but waiting for that call or email to say, yes, we're interested. So you have your initial contact, and then, I would always say give it a week, and then do your follow-up. Try to get the person's, either the hiring manager's or the recruiter's email address, which can sometimes be easily done through reception, or in another way, whether you use LinkedIn or some of the other social media tools out there to extract that information for yourself. And then thereafter, again, when you are making that initial contact for your first follow-up, ask what is an appropriate amount of time and what the timeline is, so you can gauge what is appropriate and what's not. Certainly every day or twice a week probably falls in line with over communicating, unless you've been directed otherwise.
Yeah. And what happens? How does somebody feel on the other end when they get, their inbox is just full of,
right.
communication?
So for the candidates we're interested in, it allows us to have a mental note. They're as interested in us potentially as we are in them. So it does give us, an opportunity to say, okay, great, we're on the same page. And for the others, you would hope that, us as recruiters have an opportunity to kind of manage our expectations, to say, yes, thank you for your interest. However, we have selected other candidates that that are more qualified, or that are closely more matched with the opportunity that you're interviewing for. So that's how I manage it. Hopefully many other companies manage it that way also, but that allows someone to, move on instead of being, attached and worried about that position.
Okay.